Hi everyone, let's take just a few minutes to go through part 3 of your diet project. Now, this part of your diet project is all about the macronutrients. That is, how much or how many of your calories are coming from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. That is, I want you to compare your intake with the AMDR for each one of these, the acceptable macronutrient distribution range. I also want you to look at your intake of cholesterol and fiber and compare that with the recommended intake levels. And when you're talking about your fats in your diet, what specific types of fat predominate? Are they unsaturated fats? Are they saturated fats? If they're unsaturated, are there more monos or polyunsaturated fats? And what specific foods are these specific fats coming from? Also, where's your fiber coming from? What are the good sources of fiber that are found in your diet? And then I do want you to look at what is the most energy dense food in your diet. Remember what energy density is? It's a measure of calories per gram. So high calorie foods tend to be also high in fat. So I want you to look for foods that tend to be high in calories for a small amount of food. And again, it tends to be fat. You will need information about the weight of a food and your calories in that food, and that information is in part 1 of your diet project. So that's what I want you to look at. So for the first part, about what percent of your calories is coming from each of the macronutrients, I want you to look at page 3, at the bottom of page 3, and page 4 of part 1 of your diet project. Now, here's the AMDR. Remember the recommended intake range, or percent of calories that should come from carbohydrates, proteins, and fat, and compare that with your actual intake. So this person got 61% of their calories from carbohydrates. The upper end of the range is 65%, so they're within the range, but at the upper end of that range. That's what I would say about that. For protein, they're at 15%, which is near the bottom of the range, but it's still within the range of acceptable calories from protein. And for fats, they got 25%, again, within the range. So when you're looking at what types of fat you're consuming in your diet, look at page 4 of your Part 1 report under the section called Fat Breakdown. And there it lists the different types of fat, the MUFAs and the PUFAs, the mono and the polyunsaturated fatty acids, as well as saturated and trans fatty acids. And then there's this category called unspecified fats. And really that is the category that the software puts foods that it really doesn't have complete information on into. So for this person, of the fats in their diet, remember they were getting about 25% of their calories from fat. Some of that was broken down into these different categories. So 6% of it was from the monos, 5% from the polyunsaturated fats. So that's just over 10% from the unsaturated fats, which is pretty good. And their saturated fat is only 5% of their calories, which is great because you want that to be less than 10% of your calories. No trans fats, which is wonderful. Most of the fat in their diet is coming from these unspecified sources, and it's really hard to tell what specific fats those are. So, where do you find your cholesterol and fiber intake? Well, look at page 1 of your diet project under this section called Intake versus Goals. In the left column, you see the list of nutrients. In the middle, you see the DRI, or the recommended intake level for these individual nutrients, and on the right in the third column here under intake, that's your actual intake level of these nutrients. So for this person, here's their cholesterol intake. There is no suggested DRI for cholesterol anymore. It used to be no more than 300 milligrams, but we know now that for healthy people, for most healthy people, cholesterol in the diet is not an issue. But if you have heart disease or type 2 diabetes, you would want to limit the amount of cholesterol that you got in your diet. So this person got well below the old 300 milligram recommendation, they're only getting 164 milligrams of cholesterol, which is good. How much fiber are they getting? Well, you look a little further down there, you see dietary fiber, supposed to be getting 25 grams, and they're getting 26.5. Woohoo! So they're doing a good job there. So how do we find specific food sources of these nutrients? Well, you look at the section of your Part 1 report that starts with this heading Intake Spreadsheet. Starts on page 5 of your Part 1 report, and it's the section that it makes up the largest part of your Part 1 report. So each day you'll get a spreadsheet. You'll have a spreadsheet for each day, and information on this spreadsheet is repeated. You'll see a list of your foods going down the left column, and on the right you'll see different factors or different values that are related to each food. So here on the first page of each day of your intake spreadsheet, you'll actually find the calories per weight of your food. So this is a good place to look for the most energy dense foods in your diet. And again, energy dense foods tend to be high in calories for very little weight. So you want to look at, scan this column and look at things that are particularly high in calories and for not so much weight. So if you just kind of eyeball this one, I see that the granola is 140 calories for only 30 grams. That's a pretty high ratio. I scan down even further and I see the salad dressing has about 71.8 calories for only 16 grams. Yeah, that's a little high too. I would say one of those two are in contention for one of the most energy dense foods for this particular day. So you would look at the other days as well. So what about the other nutrients? What about total fats? Where are the fats in this person's diet coming from? Well, you keep scrolling down on that day and you'll see these headings. You can look at how many grams of protein, carbohydrates, fats, and saturated fats are coming from one serving or the serving that you entered for each of the foods that you entered into Part 1. So if we keep going, you see the next column, or if we keep going down that page, you'll see that of those foods that were high in fat, well, which ones are the highest in saturated fat? Well, the granola's got 6 grams of fat, so that's pretty up there, but only 1.5 grams of saturated fat. The salad dressing, oil and vinegar. Of course, it's going to be high in fat, but it's relatively low in saturated fat, not much more than the granola. And it looks like most of the fat on this day for this person's diet is coming from this sushi. Probably from the avocado in their California roll, but that's mostly going to be unsaturated fat. Sure, there's a combination of saturated and unsaturated fats in most fat-containing foods. It's got 2.5 grams of saturated fat of the 17 total grams, but I suspect if we scroll down even further on in this report, we'll see the specific mono and polyunsaturated fat content of that particular food, and I'll bet it's much, much higher in the unsaturated fats than the saturated fats. So you would continue to do the same thing when you're looking at the fiber content of specific foods and talk about where your sources of those particular nutrients are coming from. Okay, that's it. I hope you have fun. Let me know if you have any questions.